Oh Lord, what did I just walk in on with you guys? What are you and Craig up to? Bunch of red-handed.
If we stay very still, he won't notice us here.
You are not John Cena or Drax.
It is late because I couldn't think of a clever comeback, and that wasn't a clever comeback.
Nope, but it's a good try. Good try. Man, that was a horrible opener. We're keeping it.
I'm Statler and you're Waldorf. This is the Grumpy Muppets.
I would actually watch that. Oh wait, I did watch that for years. Man, I love Statler and Waldorf. Those guys were awesome.
So my daughter's watching, all the cartoons.
Hold on. I'm Jay. And your name. What's your name? Did you forget it? I know it's like 1 a.m. where you're at, but did you forget your damn name?
No, I thought you were just going to do the intro.
Oh, no, I was waiting on you. I'm Jay.
And I'm Chris.
There you go. Good job. And we're the Grumpy Dungeon Masters. There, now we've done the intro the way you like to do them.
Right. So anyways, the Muppet Babies, there's a new cartoon they have out there my daughter watches. And,
I know all about the Muppet Babies. I grew up watching Muppet Babies.
No. This is a new one.
They brought it back?
Yeah, essentially. They don't have like the twins. They have some little penguin girl with them now.
They don't have no Skeeter and Scooter?
Nope.
Oh man.
But animal's animal. So that when they go outside in the backyard and they play and whatnot, Statler and Waldorf are two old men who sit on a balcony that kind of like overlooks the little playground and just yells at the Muppet Babies the entire time. It's just great.
Appropriate, yeah. Definitely sounds different than the Muppet Babies I grew up with, but I am glad that they're bringing back some of the old great cartoons. I know Animaniacs is coming back here shortly, and I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. Heard some bad stuff, some weird rumors about ownership and like the original writer's not coming back, but
I mean it's the same voice actors at least, I think. I know for sure it's at least some of them.
I think the heart of the show will be there, but maybe not the writing will be as on point.
Yeah, fair. Generally with cartoons, if they bring them back again years later, it's just not the same. I think time periods just sort of change, but
yeah,
it is what it is. I still have a love for them, so I'm glad to see them rehashed, even if they're not as good as they originally were.
So speaking of cartoons, there is a Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. Have you seen it?
Which one? I've seen a few of them. There was the original one from the 80s. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, the cartoon one, yeah.
Yeah, well, they also did a cartoon movie of the Dragonlance series, Leaves of Autumn Twilight, I think. They did a couple of the Dragonlance movies.
That's Dragonlance. That doesn't count.
That's fucking Dungeons and Dragons. That is very, very D&D.
It may be, but
that is more D&D than the D&D cartoon was, because the D&D cartoon had a whole bunch of kids who were from planet Earth, which isn't a thing in D&D.
I just like in the very first episode of the show,
they fight Tiamat, and by fight Tiamat, I mean run away from Tiamat. Yeah.
Just, I mean, what a dick move for DM.
No, that sounds like a brand new dungeon master. Like that makes perfect sense. Okay, you guys are first level. You're a wizard. You don't really know how to do magic. You have this cool cloak that lets you turn invisible at will. You have a magic bow that just makes arrows. All right, cool. You guys are badasses. You're gonna fight Tiamat. Like that sounds like a brand new, 12-year-old dungeon master. Like some shit they would have pulled on Stranger Things. I mean, look. Yeah, go ahead. Like, I was gonna say real quick that on Stranger Things, who knows what level they were, but it was just the three of them fighting the Demigorgon.
Well, you can buy that adventure.
Oh, I know. I've actually seen it. I've read through it.
Yeah, I love the mini that comes with it because it actually comes with a little Demigorgon and.
Yes, sort of.
No, it comes with one. Just straight up.
It's the Demigorgon from the show, though, isn't it? It's not from the D&D Demigorgon.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
but the cool part is like the adventure is written um, as like the kid wrote it in his notebook, and so it's not like a technical manual like a normal D&D adventure is. It's like a legitimate um, kid wrote this in his notebook, and like when so and so gets in here, he's probably going to do this, so make sure to trigger this trap,
Yep.
and other kind of things. It's a very interesting thing to have and own.
I love it. I'm glad they released it. It's a good introduction for people who are fans of the show to get into Dungeons and Dragons.
See, I don't know if it is because it is very so suited to like if you give it to someone who doesn't know anything about running Dungeons and Dragons and they read through that and they're just gonna be confused. Like, is this how all the books read? And it really isn't,
I don't think so. I think I believe it is geared towards kids or young teenagers. It because you don't have to understand the rules and everything. You don't really and truly have to grasp the game to be interested in it. When I first started Dungeons and Dragons and I bought the red box edition, I didn't have a freaking clue what I was doing. And yet I still ran adventures for my friends. And we had a hell of a good time despite me ignoring rules and just ignoring things.
Yeah.
That's what it's sort of designed to do, I believe.
To a degree, yeah, but it's just how it's presented. It's not presented in a way for you to um, understand a session and work it. It's just the kid's notes about how to run an encounter for his friends, and
Yeah,
that's not how a book is written.
that's fair. I mean, as well, it's also sort of made for collectors. So,
Yeah.
yeah, like Redbox was great back in the day, and I know they've done other sort of introductory, like I think there's a starter kit for Dungeons and Dragons now, which is how they sort of introduce people. But
Yeah, the Lost Mines of Phandalin.
yeah, yeah. But for people who were just fans of Stranger Things who didn't know anything about D&D, that might be their first introduction to it.
Yeah, I don't think, like I said, I definitely will like don't think that's Dungeons and Dragons because, well, the books are much more technical and actually work.
Yeah, yeah. Well, also realize they were playing first edition D&D in the show.
Yeah, it's true. No, they were playing.
It was first edition. That
Was
show
it
takes
first?
place. The show takes place in the 80s. Second edition D&D didn't drop till 89, 90.
Okay.
So yep, yep. And yeah, it wasn't Redbox, which was Dungeons and Dragons Basic, which it came out mid late 80s, I think. But those
Yeah.
weren't the book. Those were not the books. That is actually first edition D&D they were playing. I have a couple of the books they had in the show floating around here.
Sell them, get some money.
They're not worth that much. I could probably sell them on eBay for $40 or so.
I think you'd be surprised.
No, I'm not. I've looked.
Okay.
Like if they were in pristine condition, I might be able to get $100 out of them or something. But they're not super collector's items. Now, a first edition of Chainmail that would be valuable. That was what a D&D originally was, if you recall.
Okay.
Yeah,
Never heard of it.
before it was Dungeons and Dragons, it was a miniatures war game called Chainmail,
Okay.
created by I believe it was Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax in the 70s. So, but anyway,
I think I remember hearing about that a little bit.
yeah, we've discussed it on the podcast before, at least briefly. But
I
that
don't
would have
listen to our podcast.
yeah. I mean, I'm talking. We probably talked about this in like episode 5 or 6. So God, that was I don't know. That was months ago. I don't expect you to remember this stuff.
I don't remember anything.
So since we were briefly talking about sort of weird rules in the vein of the Stranger Things, I wanted to sort of talk about weird rules in Dungeons and Dragons. And like I've had players, and mind you, not with my current play group, they don't do this, but I've had other players sort of bring up the fact that the rules are just really weird and don't make sense. So one of the things that is always weird to me is talking in combat.
Okay.
The way I sort of understand the rule on this is you have you know a round of combat for you is 6 seconds. So you can say on your turn what you could say within 6 seconds. Am I correct in sort of understanding how that works?
There's an error in logic there, and I'll explain it in a bit. But that's how most people interpret it.
Okay, yeah, that's how I interpret it. But the problem is that combat is an entire round of combat is 6 seconds. So from say initiative 25 when the first person goes to initiative 1 when the last person goes is 6 seconds, and you're only able to talk on your turn. So this is just it's a flaw in the rule on when you're able to speak. Like we LARP. 6 seconds in combat at LARP is very quick, and everyone is talking as it's going on.
Hmm.
So it just is a rule that never made sense to me in D&D. Like personally, I think you should just be able to say anything you need to say as long as it's not more than 6 seconds, and you can say it whenever on whoever's turn.
So, what people have a hard time understanding about the rounds in Dungeons and Dragons is the entire round, everybody doing their attacks and doing what they're doing, including all the monsters, is a period of 6 seconds. When your turn occurs, you are essentially spending that 6 seconds of that round doing your thing. But in kind of the reality of the situation is that this is your action and you're taking place in the first second of the 6 seconds. You're just reacting first. And then the next person's reacting after you all the way down past the 6 seconds. And so they came up with that rule, they came up with that margin. It kind of doesn't work if you have 6 players, you know.
Hmm.
Every player is essentially a second in that turn. And then any monsters are also going off and that same amount of time. Um, so when it comes to conversations on your turn, you can bleed out a couple words essentially, and that's it. That's all you could technically do in reality.
Hmm.
What I see a lot of people do is like they kind of get to their turns, like, okay, I can talk, so I'm going to say something for 6 seconds, and then usually someone responds, and then they start having a conversation going on, and that
Yeah, yeah,
that that is definitely not what's supposed to happen. But it's kind of like an unspoken rule. You just kind of let that happen as long as it doesn't get too winded. A lot of DMs really tighten down that knob sometimes and not let the players speak more than a couple words. Um, and I think that ruins the the fun of the game a little bit,
It
and it
you
kind of
don't
takes
you
away
don't
from
want
the RP.
yeah you don't want to get too rules heavy. That's for sure. We've discussed this a lot of the time on this podcast. It's rules are important, but it is about keeping the game moving, keeping it flowing, and not breaking your stride. So if you get too
Right.
rule heavy, it will absolutely do that. Um,
So in my last session of Rhyme of the Frost Maiden, there's a situation that occurred at the very end of the stream, if you care to go watch it, where the players are kind of all talking to each other.
go
There's
watch.
no immediate threat that's going on, so I kind of let them still stay in initiative order, but I let them talk and do their thing as much as they wanted.
Yeah,
Now, if they were
if
in,
there's
in
no
immediate
threat, sure.
right, if there was no immediate threat, or if there was an immediate threat, um, I might make sure that they don't say something, too critical. Because you got to remember too that 6 seconds is happening at the same time for everybody. So I could say something and then you could respond, and maybe there's a response back in 6 seconds. But in reality, especially coming from the LARPing scene, we know that's not how it goes. There's no conversation.
No, like especially well-oiled groups, they don't really have a lot of conversation. They just react and they're so used to what they do. Like playing a spellcaster, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. You play a fighter, you know what you're supposed to be doing. We're not having a lot of conversation during that. We're just
Yeah.
acting.
Right.
And truthfully, in D&D and like combat, that's how that's going to go most of the time.
Like if you really have a problem with it and you really kind of want to tighten that screw down, let them let let them use their free action to do it and make it a resource just like everything else. Don't give them 100 free actions in a turn, but it's just they can do one thing and just kind of leave it at that. It's not going to be the best solution, but it's the one that most people kind of work with to kind of let things happen.
And it's not even so much as talking, just as initiative in Dungeons and Dragons is kind of wonky. So I have a house rule that I've been using for years, and I don't do it on Roll20 because Roll20 actually breaks down initiatives into percentages. So if two people roll a 16 on initiative, one of them, because of a higher dex score, something might have a 16.14, and somebody else might have a 16.04. So the 1.4 goes before the 04. In person, I don't break it down in percentages. If both players, say a player is on 16 and a monster is also on 16, both of them will get their actions. Period. And so even if that one person, if the player goes before the monster and kills the monster, I still allow the monster to take its turn because it's acting at the same time.
Okay.
So that's just sort of a house rule. Not all my players are familiar with it.
That's definitely unusual.
Yeah, I mean they're on the same initiative. Why wouldn't it
Yeah.
get its turn? You know.
Yeah, and well, another thing that was kind of funny too is the DM that I played with that he kind of got me back into playing fifth edition. Um, he was brand new to D&D and DMing, and he fell into the trap that everybody's turn is 6 seconds.
Hmm.
So
Oh,
you just
oh,
have this idea of like playing Final Fantasy, where it's like, okay, the fighter goes, then it takes 6 seconds to do his, and then like another guy goes, and it makes sense from like a tactics game,
yes, yeah. From a strategy
but
combat game, it makes perfect sense, but reality
because
it doesn't.
we had a ton of cross wires. Like, no, this is all happening at the same time, and we had to like work through that, which is kind of interesting because there's a couple other players that didn't play Dungeons and Dragons at all.
Hmm.
I even had to look up the rule because like, did they change this from fourth? That's weird.
No, and it's been that way since second edition. That is a rule that has never changed that I'm aware of. So another weird rule to me is armor. So in Dungeons and Dragons, if you have a higher armor class, you're harder to hit. And I understand it's sort of just breaking it down into you're taking less damage because your armor's just protecting you and it's not piercing it. But in reality, armor should just be straight up reduction in the amount of damage that you take, as opposed to you avoided the attack. Does that make sense
That's
to you?
that's not necessarily true either. So from a reality standpoint, um, someone with a slashing sword versus someone in full plate, good fucking luck ever killing them because you could
Yeah, good luck.
slash at somebody full plate until you and everyone else in your team is winded. You will not hurt that person in full plate. If you start trying to stab them with a sword in a couple key areas where there's like not plate, then yeah, you might be able to do some damage, but you know,
Yeah, that's what
person
military picks were for, was killing people in armor.
right. So then you get to the war pick. And the war pick was designed specifically to pierce and puncture and kill people in plate. That's why maces and flails were so effective because you use a flange mace and hit somebody in the arm, you've broken through the armor, you've pierced them, and the bludgeoning damage has broken their arm. So
Yep.
then you go from plate as a damage reduction only has damage reduction versus slashing, no damage reduction versus bludgeoning, and then like some damage reduction versus piercing, and that's too many rules
And then everybody just starts using nothing except maces and flails because it's the
Right.
best weapon possible.
So that to me is something understandable. It's a trope of
Oh,
fantasy games. You wear plate and you just become harder hit because you
yeah.
have more protection.
And
Where
I
green,
understand. I
yeah,
don't dislike any of these rules. These are just rules that I thought were kind of weird and didn't always make sense. There are definitely other role playing systems out there that will break these things down and have 50,000 other rules for people who just want rules upon rules to go with their rules. D&D is a lighter and fluffier game, but it's still, it's just something I wanted to point out and have a conversation about.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, I don't mind how D&D handles it. I like it. It's your standard. Plate is noisy while leather is quiet and
which
sneaky.
we all know is not fucking true. Not even remotely, and I can probably run just as fast in chainmail as a normal person without it. So it shouldn't hinder movement as much as it does in the game. Uh, I have a whole list of these, but I'm just going to talk about one more that and this one I really do think they should have something in the game, and it's not even like a massive rule. It wouldn't be a massive change or difficult to add something to this, but it's the idea of having one hit point, yet you have no penalties at all. So you've been standing here fighting a dragon, and it has done 180 damage to you, smashed you into the dirt, and your cleric throws a heal wounds at you or whatever, and you've got, I don't know, 4 hit points left. Yet at that point, you are functioning as if though you are in perfect condition. You are still able to do the standard amount of damage you were able to do. You are still able to move your full movement speed, take bonus actions, reactions, and so forth. Doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Listen, no one plays the one body hit game right.
That's also true. That
So
is
my thought of this is it's too hard to play with play your character with as being one body unless like you have a nice group of people that actually know how to play in and kind of adds a little extra bit of flair.
it's not hard though.
And
There are a lot of other role playing games that do give you penalties as you start taking damage.
so I like the fourth edition system a lot. I like bloodied a lot. When you
Mhm.
get past half your hit points, you're considered bloodied. And they had abilities and triggers that happened once you hit bloodied, you know? So like there were orcs that were like once they got bloodied, their damage increased by one. Or hey, if
Right.
you got bloodied, your resolve pushes you through and you get a free healing surge. There was a lot of mechanics tied around bloodied, and I thought it was a great mechanic, and I'm very disappointed it's not in fifth edition because I don't think it took anything away from the game having that in there. And it was a good marker of okay, shit, that character is now bloodied. I understand that he's on his way out. And if you wanted to add in like critically wounded as a stat for like, the bottom third or the bottom quarter, that would also work as well too. And I don't think that'd be too difficult to use on top of like bloodied.
So I started using that terminology this past weekend when I was running Frost Maiden. Anytime they got below half, I would say they're bloodied. And my players are actually fine with it. So I've decided that I'm going to have different tiers of it. Full health, they're fine. They're good to go. I haven't figured out what once they lose a quarter of it is. I'll have to figure out a term for that. Half was bloodied, and I've decided that if they get down to a quarter or under, they are ragged. They're in
Yeah,
ragged condition. Yeah.
when enemies get below um a quarter hit points, I don't give it a condition like bloodied is a condition
Hmm.
to me. I just say that they don't look like they can stay afloat or on their
Yeah.
feet for much longer.
Well, I'm not even
Or they
talking
look
about. Yeah, I'm not saying
when
give it a condition. I'm just going to call it ragged. That
right.
way they know.
But like I said, I came from fourth and bloodied was a condition. So
Mm. My only problem with the Bloodied having conditions to it from fourth edition, and Yeah, it's the constant complaint of fourth edition was it was too much like a video game. Me and you, we both played WoW for a long time, and how many bosses in that game when they reach 75% hit points or 50% hit points? Oh, they're now enraged. Oh, now they do this at this juncture. Like when they hit certain points, they would have reactions and things that they would do. So putting that in D&D makes it feel more video game esque.
I think it's all in how you present it. If the trigger always happens at bloodied, it's kind of weak, you know. But if you trigger it off of conditions the players wouldn't know or don't see, then it won't come off as very video gamey.
Or possibly even something that the players do.
Yeah.
If they cast a fireball, it will do X in response, or a post fireball, it'll do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, like those don't feel as bad. That being said, I think that should be a DM's prerogative. Maybe have just a sort of massive list of random things like that monsters can do. Doesn't even have to be a specific monster that gets these things. Yeah, like
Yeah, and that's
just
why I
a list of 20 effects that monsters could have on top of their thing. Okay, so you're playing against a beholder and it gets hit by a bludgeoning attack. Well, it will instantly do its thing.
so
Things like
I did something like that for my home campaign, which I'm not doing in Rime of the Frostmaiden. And Rime of the Frostmaiden, I'm keeping it as to the book as I can.
hmm
Um, and I had a critical hit injury chart for the players. Because critical hits in 5th edition are shit, I went with the 4th edition critical hit rule, which was max damage on your attack plus an additional die roll on top of it. So at very least, you're doing max damage of a normal attack plus the extra damage of another die roll. They got rid of it in 5th edition because the hit points were a much different kind of pool. And if a player got hit by a critical hit, they're just dead.
yeah.
That's,
Oh, no,
that's
I was running. I'm not going to say, and I'm not going to say anything about the encounter, but I was running Frost Maiden this weekend, and they get to the last encounter in the East Haven stuff that's going on. If your players go that way, and they get into the fight with the bad guy at the end of it, and the barbarian first round of combat crits on the first attack and manages to roll nearly a maximum crit, so 31 damage to this monster. Who immediately then tries to run the hell away because that's just sort of what happens. Like they took them well into bloodied status on a single swing at level 3. So crits can definitely they can change an encounter, whether it be
yeah.
whether it be the monster critting the players or the players critting a monster. It can just swing an encounter differently very easily.
So I gave the players a 4th edition crit because I want crits to matter and
Yeah,
feel good, but I didn't give it to the monsters because if
because
they did, it,
it will absolutely ruin that encounter.
right. So what I did is I took uh, from the Star Wars game, the Force and Destinies Star Wars game. I took their critical hit table and I kind of modified it for Dungeons and Dragons. I think I mentioned this earlier in another podcast, but so
We can
essentially
do it again.
in that game, if you hit somebody with a critical hit, it was like a stacking value until they got to sorry. So when they get hit with a critical hit, you had them roll a D100, and depending on what the result was on the table,
We call that
they
percentile, not a D100.
whatever, and that's the damage they had. So in that game would be like, oh, you have to add a black die to your next pool, and the equivalent of that may be like disadvantage on the next attack or next skill check or something like that. And I basically did like a 1-for-1 kind of to kind of just fill out this D100 list. And the more crits the players took, it was always the D100 plus how many crits they've taken until between a long rest. So if you roll, um, higher than 150 though, your character just dies. so it's a stacking thing. So you could keep rolling low and you could take like 10 crits and you'd be at 100. But as long as you're rolling less than 50, you're not dying.
Yeah.
So I basically brought that in, and it kind of just adds some flair to the players. Like, oh, you got staggered, you fell prone when you got critically hit, and I found that was a nice like little effect and kind of helped the combat flow some and be a little bit more varied instead of the standard kind of just hit your turn, hit your turn, hit. I don't remember what we were talking about beforehand to like come off in this tangent.
Well, we do this a lot. I think we were talking about hit points and no penalties.
Yeah, so I mean, if you want to throw in something like that when they get to like the bottom quarter, that would kind of be okay. Hey, you can't move next turn or something like that. Something that doesn't hurt them too much. Like you don't get your move action when it comes around. And the funny story is we were playing Adventures League Baldur's Gate, and we had a situation where the party was surprised by a bunch of scorpions, hell scorpions. And the paladin was grappled and restrained by one of the scorpions in their claw. And it stung her in the face.
Right,
and
in the,
she
right,
went,
in, right in the face.
Right in the face. And she went unconscious. So the other paladin just lay on hands, gave her 1 hit point. And then like the way initiative worked, it was the paladin laying on hands, giving her 1 hit point, that paladin then hitting the scorpion, and then the scorpion then stinging her in the face. And that went on.
Paladin laying on 1 hit point. Yep.
And that whole exchange went on for like 10 rounds easy. Her blood was strictly scorpion poison by the end of it. So I just I couldn't we became transfixed by these 2 paladins fighting a scorpion and her just getting stung over and over and over.
They were literally playing the 1 hit point game in Dungeons and Dragons. I know that a lot of the people listening might not have a clue about what we refer to as the 1 hit point game, but it's a thing from our LARP. Kind of what we're talking about. You get to 1 hit point, you have no penalties. So it's pretty common for people to get dropped in combat, get a single hit point back, and then just dive right back into combat, get dropped again, get a hit point back, and so forth. Rinse and repeat and ad infinitum. So
we were at the LARP one time. It was one of the Sunday afternoon,
yeah,
use up all your stuff kind of fights, and it was basically the whole town that was still there was still fighting this thing, but the big boss was just not dying. And so I finally decided to actually like help finish this off. So I stepped in, I hit it with all my big stuff, and it was still moving. And I'm just kind of like, dude, it's Sunday afternoon, stop, just stop.
We're all tired. We want to go home.
So I start wailing on it, and it ripped through all my armor and all my hit points, which is impressive. And then I get dropped, and I'm just like, holy cow, it's still going. And I get hit with a Cure 2 elixir in the back, and
so 2 hit points.
Get 2 hit points.
Get back
and
to
so
work.
Then I stood right back up and started hitting the monster, and I got like maybe 100, 150 damage in, and then I get dropped because I get 2 hit points, and then another Cure 2.
Yep.
This went on for like maybe 15 minutes. And then I talked to the player who was hitting me with those Cure 2s. He's like, this is amazing. I have to figure out how to do this. A Cure 2 turns into 150 damage. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, it's a curing spell in that game is the most efficient damage you can find. But anyway, let's get off of.
I still don't know why that person was just going to town and was not dying. It was, if I remember correctly, I put like in like the over 10,000 damage into them, and they just were not going down. It was just insane. Like, you should be dead.
So in my quest for finding some of the weird things about D&D rules, I came across one of them that I had never thought about, and this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Did you know it is possible to permanently die by leveling up?
Yes, if you have a negative constitution modifier.
Yes.
and you go from 1 to 2.
So say you're a wizard, you start with 6 hit points, but you have a -2 to the Constitution modifier, and you level up and you roll for your next level of hit points, and you roll a 1. You have actually gained negative hit points. Now, if you manage to do this 5 more times, you will actually die. Like the odds are, it's so incredibly difficult to pull that off, but it's not impossible.
I think wasn't one of the older editions you rolled for your initial hit points and you just die right then and there.
Uh, oh, it was possible because you would roll. So the original, like I know it's second edition rules. You would roll 3d6, and whatever, like the first roll that you rolled was your strength. The second roll that you rolled was your dex. The third was your con, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, in that order. So that third roll is your constitution, and if you rolled, say, a 6 on 3d6, which is definitely not that hard to do, you then have a -2 constitution modifier, and then you rolled for starting hit points. So if you roll a 1, oh, make a new character. You haven't even finished making this one. Make a new one. Yeah, it was definitely possible. I never saw it happen, but it could have. Fucking weird rules in D&D, man. Weird rules.
Yeah, I really can't think of any off the top of my head. Just there's a lot of different spells and stuff that just don't make sense.
Oh yeah, yeah. We should
especially
talk about spells anyway, since that was the next topic anyhow.
real quick. So there was a spell in 4th edition, and with 4th edition spells, you basically kind of picked it very video gamey. Like, hey, here's my level 4, and here's all my new level 4 stuff. And there's an ability a rogue got. I can't remember the name of it, but essentially it lets you move 6 spaces, make an attack, and move 6 more spaces. Now, in 4th edition, there was the move and there was the shift. Some abilities let you shift 6 spaces and then shift away 6 spaces. But this ability was specifically move 6 spaces. So you would take opportunity attacks as you did there. So it was terrible. And it was something like, quick feet or some stupid name. But when you read the descriptor for the spell, not like what the spell did, but like the flair text, like the bottom of magic cards has like the little
Right.
italicized text that says, "Hey, this does this." It says that you leap through the air, strike at an enemy, and leap away before they can hit you. But
So
that's not what the
you leap
ability did.
30 feet?
Exactly. So you leap 30 feet, then leap away before they can hit you, but yet you're moving 6 and then moving back 6. And then the player who brought this up to my attention was like, "It says I leap here in the special description text. Can I jump up
Yeah,
and bounce around and get up there?" I was just
I was
like,
gonna say it's a good way to clear pits.
"Yeah, sure, whatever, man. That ability's stupid." And I found it very weird that there's just things sometimes that people just don't put it together, or like it gets missed in editing, that just ends up being a very terrible spell. And the art team or the fluff designer team didn't sync up with the designer of the actual spell and kind of like cross the t's and dots the i's to get the spell everything to line up correctly to actually be a
Well,
workable
that has the
thing.
ability to be incredibly powerful. Just the fact that you're able to leap. If you actually
But that's
define
what I'm
it as
saying.
leaping, yeah, that's
Yeah,
very powerful.
but nope, just move 6 feet.
Huh. Yeah, that's a weird one. There was weird rules. What else can I say? So we put out the question, and once again, I forgot to pull this thing up. Do you have the Facebook question?
I don't even own a computer, man. I don't know.
Holy shit, you don't know a computer. All right, well that's impressive. You're just doing this over your phone, I guess.
Telepathy.
Find it. I don't want to cut this. Basically, okay, I'm just gonna. No, it won't be verbatim, but the idea was, what are some great spells from levels 4 through 8. And it can be from any class. Like levels 1 through 4 sort of always get a little bit of love. Everybody knows them. Honestly, they know them because they're the lowest end of spells. And so that's what most people are playing campaign wise. And the ninth level spells, everybody knows them because they are the pinnacle of magic. But the 5th through 8th level spells, they tend to get overlooked a lot of time. And there's a lot of great spells in there that people oftentimes don't think about. And there were a couple of them that were posed to me that even I don't always think about, even though I have used them. So the one that was really tossed out there that I've used it before with my sorcerer, but I really have just kind of forgotten about it and sort of overlooked it since then, was Synaptic Static. Are you familiar with the spell?
Nope.
All right. Well, I will pull it up and then read it off. So it is from Xanathar's, but it's an enchantment spell, range 120 feet, and it acts sort of like Fireball, like it's a radius effect. It's 20-foot radius sphere centered on a point, and it's an intelligence save. And I know how people joke all the time about when the hell's the last time you had to make an intelligence save. Well, this is one of them. And what it does, a target takes 8d6 psychic damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. So effectively, it's Fireball, but it's 5th level, except it's enchantment. And the other part to it is if they fail to save, they have muddled thoughts for up to a minute. So during that time, it rolls a d6 and subtracts the number rolled from all its attack rolls and ability checks, as well as its constitution saving throws for maintaining concentration. And they do get an intelligence save at the end of each turn to get rid of the effect. But basically, it's an enchantment fireball that then gives them drawbacks for up to a minute with an intelligence saving throw. There's unless you're casting this on wizards, most fighter types have a reasonable chance of just straight up failing this.
I automatically fail.
Yeah. So I have cast this before as my sorcerer because he was primarily enchantment magic, but it was just something that I didn't really think too much about lately. And I know most people have never even heard of the damn spell.
There was another spell, I think it was called Freezing Sphere. I think it was 6th level.
Mm-hmm.
And it's essentially like 10d6 cold damage. It's a con save. And it's another one of those effects. It's very much like Fireball. It does extra stuff. Bring it back to the idea that Fireball is just like this spell to end all spells.
It kind of is, yeah.
My wife on that thread went Fireball question mark because she doesn't know what level Fireball is, and
yeah.
I responded back as like, no, that's actually a 3rd level spell. And then one of my players responds to that. He goes, Fireball cast at a 5th level spell slot.
Yep. I mean, in 5th edition, you can do that. I had one of my friends, I think he posted Meteor Swarm. Obviously, he didn't read the thread. No 9th level spells. 9th level spells are not allowed. I think there's a minute Meteor Swarm. That's like 6th level or something. But
Meteor Swarm in a bottle.
Yeah.
There were a magic item there.
Yeah. Hey, that's a great idea. It's like Tarask on a scroll. There are a couple of other spells that I really am a fan of. Mr. Kevin, he was on our podcast before. He brought up Simulacrum, and I'm a fan of Simulacrum. I use the hell out of that spell. He was talking about you could make basically a copy. So the spell, it takes 8 hours to cast this thing. You're making a physical copy of yourself. It has half your hit points, but otherwise it's just like you. It'll follow your commands. It'll do anything you tell it to do. And if it dies, well, it dies and you have to make a new one. He was talking about taking this thing and running around in combat with it. And, if you're throwing spells, it's throwing spells too. And it's adding to a party's effectiveness in a fight. That's not how I like to use this spell. I like to make a simulacrum of myself and then start a business with it. because it knows everything that you know. So you just leave this guy at home somewhere, buy a storefront or whatever, buy, sell, trade all these magical trinkets that you bring back from your adventures. You start selling them. You have him sitting there making magic items. Like you can make so much damn money while you're still out adventuring just by having a simulacrum start a company. You could even have him act as a pimp. I definitely wouldn't know anything about this. I have definitely never made a simulacrum that I used as a pimp before. I mean, they're effectively you. We've determined that most people in the D&D worlds are they're 0 level commoners. So if you're a I don't know 12th level wizard, you effectively are making a badass wizard also. So you just have him act as a pimp. Nobody's going to mess with him. Who's going to mess with somebody who can throw fireballs at you?
So what's the difference between simulacrum and clone?
Clone does not become active until you die.
Oh, okay.
Simulacrum, you're actually just making a copy of yourself. Clone is an exact copy of yourself, but your soul goes into it. This is assuming they haven't changed it in 5th edition. I honestly haven't looked at it, but I think that's how it works.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a way to avoid permanent death. If you die and you have a simulacrum, well, your simulacrum keeps going, but it's not you. It can't ever gain levels. It can't learn anything new.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yep.
I remember there was some sort of cheese you could do with simulacrum with like making extra simulacrums and like doubling up
They
them or something like that.
yeah, you
But they
can't
fixed
do
it
it in 5th.
recently or
Yeah.
something like that.
No, like in the player's handbook in 5e, it says if you ever cast this to make another simulacrum, it kills the previous simulacrum.
No, you have the simulacrum cast simulacrum.
Oh, I got. I don't think it would be able to, but yeah, I don't think it says anything about it, so I could see how people would try to cheese dick that.
Yeah. And so
Throw a
eventually you
layer
have this
on it,
army
yeah.
of you all doing things and then like just casting meteor rituals and shit like that.
Yeah.
The distance.
Yeah, if you have the money. I mean, it costs 1,500 gold to make one of them. But yeah, I mean, if you're a high level wizard, yeah, it's 7th level spell, so you need. God, what is that? 15th level wizard, 14th level wizard. You have to be pretty high level to even cast this thing.
Yeah.
The last one I wanted to mention briefly this is one I mentioned in the thread, but it's Force Cage. Are you familiar with this spell?
No.
Let's hope your players never figure out Force Cage and never actually get access to it, because it can absolutely just ruin encounters. So it also is a 7th level spell. Basically, you can make a 20-foot by 20-foot cage out of force. So anything that'll fit inside of that, it can just straight up stop them. And you have 2 options when you make it. You can just make it all solid force walls, or you can make it a force cage, like with bars of force. Creatures that are stuck in there, they're stuck in there until this thing goes away. Its duration is an hour. And if they're able to teleport, then they have to make a charisma saving throw. If they fail it, they can't teleport out. And it also blocks like ethereal travel through it. So if you have a big bad evil guy and he's got four goons with him, boom, force cage the big bad evil guy, kill the goons, wait an hour, mop him up. I've had this done to me before, a couple of times. It's a very potent spell that people don't know about. But anyway, that's me that's me on the wizard talk.
Are you sure you don't? I can talk about fighters for another hour. I mean, if you want to talk about wizards some more, then you feel free. I mean,
no, I did find it interesting that when we posted that question, most of the spells that were tossed out there were wizard or sorcerer spells. Like I think that's just sort of where people's mind goes to when you talk about magic in D&D. We did have a few people bring up some druid and cleric stuff, but the vast majority of it was fireball.
Yeah. Well, just so not to leave out one of our most valued friend members who plays a druid, the level 8 spell Tsunami.
Oh yeah, yeah.
If you ever positively 100% just want to ruin your DM's night, just cast Tsunami wherever
If
you are.
if you absolutely, positively must kill every commoner in town, there you go.
If you don't want the town to be around anymore, or you just want to like cast it in the hallway of the dungeon and just see what happens to the rest of the dungeon. Like I've always envisioned like standing in top of the yawning portal and just casting Tsunami over and over and over again down into the yawning portal. Like what
Huh?
happens?
I don't
Like
know.
like the place is gonna get like just super flooded. It's just gonna blow through all the doors. I mean, it's a massive dungeon down there, yeah, but after the 12th tsunami and 100 million gallons of water,
Yeah, that's
what?
interesting thought here. So what happens if you're standing at the top of the Underdark and cast a few tsunamis down there? Like by the point it reaches Menzo Barrens, does all the water hit at the same time, or is it just a little trickle of water?
The drow just like, what? Why is there water? Oh god!
No one expects a tidal wave in Menzo Barrens.
All the spiders like floating away, like we don't know how to swim.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, I have to play with this spell more. Need to start running a high level game just so I can have some big bad evil guy. That's his goal in life. It's just he goes to tiny villages, casts tsunami, and walks away. Just there's no master plan. It's just chaos of cast tsunami once at every small village and leave.
I'm gonna look at the specifics real quick on it
Yeah. I
because,
think
like,
I think it's in Xanathar's.
um, tsunami.
Yeah, that is spelled with a T, by the way.
I know how to spell tsunami. Yeah, so a wall of water springs into existence at a point of you choose within range. So the water just gets created, just poof, water.
Yep. Okay,
You
no,
can
it is
make the
actually not in Xanathar's. Go ahead. Go ahead.
you can make the wall up to 300 feet long, and 300 feet high, and 50 feet thick.
300 feet high.
Hold
Holy
hold
shit.
on. So gallons per cubic foot of water.
Thank you,
So
Google.
one cubic foot is 7.4 liquid US gallons. So then, how much cubic feet?
By the way, I'm reading this, and yes, this actually, as an 8th level spell, it just absolutely obliterates any small village. Period. Any creature getting hit by this thing takes 6d10 bludgeoning damage, or half as much on a successful save. So anything hitting this, save or not, on average is going to take 15 points of damage if it makes the save, and 30 if it fails it. That will kill any peasant. Period.
So the width was 50, right? Length
Uh,
is
it,
300, and the height is 300.
yeah, 300 by 300 by 50. That's as big as you could make this thing.
So it has 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. So it has 4.5 million cubic feet. And so just pull out the quick calculator here real
Okay,
quick. So
yeah, I don't even
4,500,
think you need to
1,
go
2,
through all
3.
this.
Hold on. Times 7.4 gallons. No, not plus 7.4.
Yeah, this is high quality listening right here, guys.
Shh, you be quiet. I have to do math.
I just
It's
want to point
hard.
out at 300 feet high, so an average floor on a building is 10 feet high. So that's effectively a 30-story building high.
So there's 33,300,000 gallons of water in this not level 8 tsunami spell. So I'm standing there in the yawning portal, casting this over and over down the yawning portal.
What's on the other side of the yawning portal?
The
An
dungeon,
ocean is what's on the other side after you're done casting all this shit.
the dungeon of the Mad Mage, which is now the ocean of the Mad Mage. And I could just see him just sitting there at the bottom of his little dungeon, going, "You guys hear any water?" And then he opens the door, and he just sees the water rushing out, and he's like, "Oh shit!" Closes the door.
The next words out of his mouth are glug 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 as he's fucking drowning.
You can't cast somatic spells when you're drowning.
Yep. So the only problem with your casting it over and over again is it's an 8th level spell and you only can cast one of those per day. Now if you're epic level and have managed to pick up some of the other abilities that you can get in the DM's guide at super high levels, then you could feasibly cast it up to 3 or 4 times a day. Just
That's
depending.
where the cheese of the Simulacrum comes in, because now I'm going to have an army of Simulacrum who can all
Yeah.
cast Tsunami. Which is, your turn. Simulacrum, like F, your turn. All right.
There you go.
G, your turn. H, your turn. All
You
right.
didn't even name them, just letters. That's it.
Well, it started with numbers, but you stop when you get to 100, and then you go to the
I don't
alphanumeric numbers.
No, I think if you're making an army of simulacrums, you need to do it just like hurricanes. Like, yeah, the first one is it's Albert, Betty, yeah, Clay. Just start naming them like you would for hurricanes.
All right. Well, we're running a bit long.
I think
Almost.
we're on time. It's normal.
Well, I wanted to discuss the RPG Writer Workshop,
All right.
which started this month, and it's currently the 8th, and so we're done with the first week of.
No. It's not we. It's you. I am not in this. I managed to avoid it this time.
So I'm on the first week of the workshop, and so each day this week there was a different lesson, and they're very introductory lessons for the first week. So I kind of wanted to read them off and kind of get everyone an idea of like what you do to start writing an adventure. So for the first day, the first lesson is getting organized, and this is kind of basically getting your bearings on what you're going to need to basically sit down there and write your adventure. Do you have a word processing tool? Do you have a folder structure that you can hold in like your ideas and your inspiration, and like some photos that you use to like draw ideas from? Like, do you have a workspace dedicated just to you that you can have a place just so you can start writing and putting in stuff and know exactly what you need to have on hand so you can start running your adventure? And they actually give you a toolkit that can help you work with and like help like add things to a calendar so you have your tasks that you can need to complete each day. They also give you a like project management tool that can help you kind of track your progress. Trello is a place that they suggest to kind of like go there and set up like a little workflow for you so you can start writing out your different processes and your different sections that you have to write on. I signed us up for Trello so we could start putting things for the Grumpy Dungeon Masters onto kind of like on paper so we can actually start seeing what our goals are to how do we like increase the brand and
Yep.
grow what we need to do. So that's something we got to work on too. Day 2 is where they want you to actually begin to create your living document. And the living document is kind of, they want you to start it by being a place where you're putting in all your notes and your ideas that you will eventually take and create an outline from, which you'll then eventually create a draft from. So it's basically just a Word document, or if you're using like a notes tool, a place where you can kind of like throw in all your ideas and let things
Brainstorming.
kind of breathe and brainstorm, quite a bit. So that's always, a great thing to have. Lesson 3 is designing for accessibility. And this
That's where I bailed out on the last one.
is where you bailed out of the last one, but it's something very important and actually something that I've been doing professionally for the past couple of weeks. Being that where I work, there's a certain standards we have to meet for people who are colorblind or are completely blind, and or have dyslexia, or any kind of like trigger warnings in the text and stuff that you write. Like, how do you create something for somebody with that in mind? The biggest thing is whenever you create an image, like you tweet the image out or you put it on Facebook, if you don't put alt text on that image, someone who is blind and using like a reader is not going to know that the image is there. Or if they do get told that the image is there, they're just going to get like image underscore 209.jpg. That's not going to tell them anything. So if that image was important for you trying to get your point across, well, then you failed, because now that blind person can't understand what that image is. And I've actually had to train a few people in the past month on how to create proper alt text for organizational charts and company images that they wanted to use, and kind of how to word it without being too wordy, and actually create proper alt text for people who use screen readers. So it's a very overlooked step, but one that really does need to be addressed at some point in time. Like, I got some feedback that on my last adventure that the blue that I used in the background was very hard for people to look at for too long. So that's something that I need to change if I'm going to use that background again, just as an example.
Yeah.
And so lesson 4 for day 4 was the actual brainstorming, and they called it IDting, which I don't remember the exact definition of that would be.
I
But the,
don't even know what that is.
but basically this is like you gathering your ideas and putting them in one place, like creating a folder and filling it full of images that reflect to the area that you're trying to design. The creator of this was also the author for Rime of the Frost Maiden. And one thing that she did is she found a lot of like very winter photos, with lots of like, colors and the aurora borealis, and just different snow snowscape images, and use that as part of her brainstorming session, and in order to create kind of like the mood and atmosphere of what she was trying to work on. So it's
Yeah,
always
like
definitely good to have that thing. They call it a mood board. It's just a bunch of images, but they also kind of get into ideas of like playing the proper music while you write
mhm.
to help keep you in the right frame of mind.
Yeah, we've talked about it briefly on the
Yeah.
podcast before, like a mood board thing. I will use mood board style ideas when I'm sort of prepping for a new campaign. It gets my brain in the right process for thinking of the game that I'm going to be putting together.
Yep. And so the day 5 exercise was actually creating a synopsis of what your adventure was going to be. And instead of just kind of giving a brief overview of everything, it's kind of hard to delve deep into it, actually what a synopsis is for your adventure. But it's kind of like the background, the overview, maybe like the hooks that'll get the players into the campaign, and kind of just fleshing out what those are. So,
Mhm.
I have an idea of bringing another character that I use in and using him as the hook for the adventures. And why is he out there being a hook? Because he needs to have a couple of MacGuffins gotten for him, and he can't get those MacGuffins because of X, Y, and Z reasons. Very traditional, and so that's kind of like an area where you can kind of flex your creative muscle and kind of create new and unusual reasons as for why the players are there.
Yep.
Icewind Dale, everyone starts off in my campaign as a citizen of Icewind Dale. But when you get down into the deep nitty gritty of what the players are actually there for, there's a couple things you can give people who are like, hey, you escaped up here because your family were a bunch of thieves and murderers, and that could be a good background for a hook that you're going to have to basically start an adventure up in Icewind Dale. It's like, hey, I need you to help me get out of Icewind Dale because people are trying to kill me. Something along those lines.
Yep. All important stuff.
Lesson 6 of the first week was basically creating an outline. And they gave a couple ideas. Like I said, definitely go through the course and kind of read each individual step because it's all very helpful. What I got out of this is basically I like making flowcharts, so I just made a flowchart. You know, start here with the quest. Here's a couple of options they can break out to. Here's a couple of encounters and when they would occur. Here's the story beats that I want to hit, and I'm done. And that's pretty much how I write my D&D sessions anyways. I kind of go from beat to beat to beat, but seeing it all written out as a flowchart helps me visualize that process a little bit more and actually lead the players properly through without trying to hand holding them as well too. So it lets me breathe in every single area and every single major story beat, but also lets me design stuff that works and flows better between one to the other. Lesson 7 was a little generic, so it was basically just how to go from an outline to a draft, and that was pretty much just sit down and start writing. Don't be lazy.
Yep.
Um,
I mean,
but
that's the hardest part. Just sit down and do it.
yeah. So I mean, when you write a draft, you got to remember too that writing a D&D module for publication is not writing a story. It is writing a technical document. So you have to approach it like a technical document. So you have to write it like if you're trying to explain someone how to open up their internet browser and go to Facebook and then post a message on Facebook. That's how you have to treat writing a D&D module for publication. Now, if you're doing it at home for your own benefit, you don't need to have that because you as the writer know those in between steps. But when you have an actual module, you have to write it all out in that kind of very specific do A, then B, then C, then D, then E,
Yep.
and then go back to B and do it again.
Just from
And
having run Icewind Dale as much as I have, I could tell you there's so many things that they just cannot cover in a campaign that large. Like you never know what your players are going to do. They can't put every single piece of information of everything that every NPC is going to do in all situations. It's just not possible. So you just have to write this technical document, and as you're describing it, as precise as possible, and let the DM sort of figure out the steps that will be necessary if these other issues come up.
mhm,
But yeah, like if you're going to write one of these things, I suggest reading a bunch of them first. That way you
yeah,
can sort of see, you can pick the points. You'll be able to actually see the steps that were taken to get this thing down on paper.
mhm. Um, and on that note, and the last thing that I'll mention, um, you could have the most precise technical manual ever. There are always going to be people who are not going to be able to follow it, or who are basically just going to read the Cliff Notes version of it, which is just the first couple words in each sentence, and just
That's what
skip
I
on to.
do.
That's what you do.
Yep.
And then sometimes there are going to be players, DMs, I mean, who are going to follow it to a letter, and they'll have a hard time if they don't have the ability to go off book as well too.
Yep.
So I'm going to end this with a quick story. You can watch this happen on our stream
Story
that we
time.
had on Saturday, where our players were going from town to town in Icewind Dale doing the quests. They found the hook. They got the quest from the hook, and they were going off to do something with the quest. And I'm being very vague because I don't want to spoil most of Icewind Dale. But the situation that then unfolded after that point in time was not quest related at all, and it took about an hour to complete. And It ended in the most spectacular way possible. In that session, we had 2 player deaths, one at the very beginning and one at the very end. One at the very beginning was very kind of by the book. You found a monster that was just a little too hard for you, and he got you. But at the end, sometimes PvP just happens, and when it does, yeah, somebody dies.
Yeah, our next podcast, let me go ahead and write this in the notes. Are you sick to death of players in PvP?
Are you sick of death of having players that are just evil all the time, as one of
Yeah.
our good friend put it?
Yes. Yeah.
So look forward to next
I think
week.
the term wasn't evil. I think it was, are you sick of players who play characters that are utter pieces of shit?
I don't, but we'll save that for next week.
That's next one. All right, guys. It's been fun. Bye, Craig. Bye, Chris. Bye, listeners.
Oh, presenter.